Alright, so back into the same scene, what we're going to do is we're going to start setting up our lighting for our scene. And the way we're going to approach this is pretty systematically. Now we have two types of lighting that are going to work in this scene. We're going to have direct lighting, which is the actual direct lighting coming off of lights and things. And then we're going to have indirect lighting, which indirect lighting is the global illumination effect itself. It's that secondary lighting that bounces off of objects and helps to light up the room in a more realistic way. The photons, basically. So we can see that this apartment has three areas with windows. We've got this window over here. We've got another window right here and another window over here. I have tentatively called these windows the south window with this one. This window over here will be called the west window, and this one will be called the north window. Now I did that so it's easier to identify the windows, so we know what we're talking about here, and it makes more sense to pretty much to name and label the windows that way. Okay, so I'm going to start off with the south window. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a spotlight. So let's go to primitive, light. Let's grab a spot. Close the PPG, we don't need it for now. Let's hit F to frame in here, and just so happens that our light is inside of our couch. So let's go to wireframe mode, and there's our spotlight. Let's go ahead and go up here to our camera view options and check on isolate selection, so we only see the spotlight or whatever's selected, which should be the spotlight. And here's our annoying little light interest here that's controlling where our spotlight looks. Again, I want to delete that. And this spotlight is constrained to this null over here called a spot root, and I honestly don't like that. So I'm going to take this spotlight and I'm going to hit cut to cut that relationship. The spotlight disappears, don't worry about that, we'll get it in a moment. I'm going to go ahead and delete the spot root, and that should kick us back into the regular view mode, so it takes us out of isolate view selection. And here's our spotlight. Again, just like in the previous example, my rotational values are, well, strange numbers here. So let's go to transform, reset rotation, so we knock that back to the correct rotation that I'd like. And what I'm going to do is simply move this light, and I want to place it right here where this window's at. I'm going to place it in front of the window. I'm not going to place it inside the window or inside the apartment. I want it to be on the outside. That's how the effect is going to look best. So here's our window right here, and we don't want the spotlight too close or too far away, so something about right here looks good. Just eyeball it, should be fine. It's no big deal. Let's go ahead and hit V for Victor on the keyboard to switch over to rotate mode, and you want to rotate on the green axis, which is the Y axis, and you want to rotate it negative 90 degrees, which you can see here in my numerical field. It's negative 90, and it looks like it's a good distance from the window. That looks pretty good. Okay, the height's pretty good. I want it to be around the middle of the height of the window, and obviously right in the middle of the width of the window itself. So it's going to be in the middle and a little bit back. Okay, now with that light in place, let's go ahead and do a render region. And there's our lighting. We can see our light clearly inside the room. Now this looks pretty bad right now, so what we have to do is tweak it. With that spotlight selected, what I'm going to do is hit shader over here to open up its PPG. And we're going to have to make quite a few edits here. Now the first major edit I want to make is, of course, I want to enable shadows. So I'll turn shadows on. And I'm going to turn the Umbra all the way off. Okay, so I end up with something like this. And this, of course, is still not looking too good. So the next thing I want to do is I want to change the cone angle of the light. By default, it's set to 60. Now, for you to understand how the cone angle works, I'm going to show you something really neat in a moment so you can visualize it better. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase it and watch what happens, how it updates in the render region. As I increase the cone angle, the area that the light reaches becomes larger. So before, the cone angle looks something like this. It was this shape around here. Now the cone angle is very broad, very wide, and encompasses a larger area. So you can think about it as someone kind of putting their hand over a flashlight and just moving the hand away from the flashlight more and more, so more of the light can spread out a lot more. That's what the cone angle does. What I want is the light to come in a little bit better, like if it was coming into this window. Obviously it doesn't look like it is right now because of this round shape and because the shape is way out here when it should actually be closer over here to the window. So I'll just increase the size of that more and more until I get a result that looks good. So let's try some more. Almost at 150 right now. And I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller so it renders faster. And that looks a lot better. Let's go ahead and increase that a bit more. And that looks a lot better. Increase that a little bit more. And now we're getting the light fully coming into the window, which is looking really good. So I ended up with a value of 160 just to have a cleaner number instead of 167.4 something something something. Let's just go ahead and round this off to 170. Okay, so that's pretty good. So we're good to go right there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to collapse that PPG. I don't want to go it anywhere for now, so I'm just going to collapse and tuck it out of the way. And here's that neat little trick that I was going to show you with the light. We can't see the cone angle in the viewport, so we kind of have to do render regions and guess what the cone angle should be. Wouldn't it be cool if there was some kind of feature that we could turn on to see the cone angle? Fortunately, exercise cool like that, so we can actually turn that on. Hit B for Bravo on your keyboard and you'll open up the Spotlights manipulator, and this lets you see the actual cone angle. So if I go over here to the PPG and I reduce the cone angle, you can see it interactively change shape. Isn't that neat? And when I come over here and draw a render region, for example, we can see that where the light hits is in fact where this cone angle representation is, and the cone angle is being represented by that yellow color, this sort of yellow haze that's right here connected to the light. That's the actual cone angle of the light. So wherever you see that yellow area hit, like right there, it gives you a good idea of where the actual cone angle is going to be when you do a final render. So you can see there's the cone angle and it matches up perfectly with the manipulator. So that's a very neat tool to use. Again, activate it and deactivate it with the B key on the keyboard, B for Bravo. So I'll hit B again to turn that off. And I'm going to set this back to 170. Okay. Alright, so now that I have that done, let's go ahead and adjust the intensity of this light. Let's come inside the room though. I want to show you something that's completely wrong with this light. Let me do a render region of this area over here. Okay, now at first glance it's kind of hard to tell what's going on here and what's wrong with this light. But I'm going to go ahead and show you and point out what's wrong with the light. Alright, this may seem normal to the untrained eye and to a beginner. However, there's something drastically wrong with the way that this light is working. As you can see, the light is shining on one, it's lighting up, no big deal. And then when it hits this back wall over here, it lights it up too. It's a problem though. In real life, lights don't behave this way. You're probably thinking, what are you talking about? That looks perfectly fine. Well, it's not perfectly fine. In real life, a light is brighter toward the source of the light itself. As the light photons or the light energy has to go across a longer distance, that light energy starts to wear off and fade away. It starts to essentially decay over time and space. This means that by the time the light hits a back wall, the light should not be as bright on this wall as it is on this wall over here in this area. That's how lights work in the real world. Right now this light is not doing that, therefore it's not acting very realistic. So we need to fix that. Let me go back into the lights PPG. I'm just going to pin it down over here. I have a bad habit of accidentally closing these things or changing them and things like that, so I'm just going to pin it down. Okay, so to turn on that feature that mimics real life lighting, which is called light fall off, we're going to go and check on this light fall off parameter. And when we check that on and do a render region, you're going to notice something that appears to go wrong. Our light essentially got turned off. What happened? Well, what happened is that when you're working with light fall off, you have to use very high light values. So let's go ahead and increase this to say 500. And now you see our light appears in our room. But now the light is actually behaving correctly. What I mean by that is the closer that the light is to an object, the more that object's going to be lit up by the light, the more intense the lighting is going to be on that object. So this part of the wall which is closer to the light is going to be more brightly lit than this area that's back here. That is much more realistic, and that imitates the way that light behaves in the real world. Let me go ahead and increase that to say something like 1000. You can see we have to start using much larger numbers to get this to work. So now you can see the effect a little bit more dramatically. Areas over here closer to the window are more brightly lit, and areas back here get dimmer and dimmer and dimmer until the light eventually cannot light up anything anymore. So another important thing about the light fall off parameter, let me cancel out that render region, is the light fall off. Now in XSI you can control the distance at which the light falls off, so it doesn't fall off forever. What we need to do is hit F12 so we can see our 4 different viewports here. What I'm going to do is show you the light fall off here real quick. With the light fall off turned on, if we go over here to say the front view, which is the side view for our light here, I'm going to hit B on the keyboard to turn on the light manipulator that we had on earlier. What you're going to notice is this purple line over here. This purple line controls the fall off. To prove it to you, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have this PPG open while I interactively adjust this fall off in the viewport right here, viewport C. What I can do is left click on the purple line and it'll turn yellow to let me know it's active, and I can change the length. Now notice in the PPG right here where it says end the fall off, the number gets updated as I update it in the viewport. The same happens if I update here in my PPG, it updates in the viewport. So essentially it's 2 ways of controlling the same exact parameter. What you want to do is make sure that the end fall off is just past your wall. The default setting was pretty much good. It was pretty good. You don't want the fall off to be over here inside the room, because let me show you what happens if you do that. Right now our fall off is so short that the light ends before it reaches the back wall. So if I do a render region of this, you notice the back wall is pitch black. Here's the light. The light actually ends here, and you can see this nasty line that tells us that the light ended. That's not realistic at all, because in real life, well, lights just don't do that. They don't just turn off when they get a certain distance. So what we're going to do is just go ahead and change that light fall off so it goes just past the wall. And once we do that, when we render, we get a more realistic result, because the light falls off and gets dimmer and dimmer and dimmer, but it actually does light up the back wall, even if it's just slightly, which is a more realistic behavior. Okay, now with that said, that was a lot of talking. What I'm going to do is hit B on the keyboard to turn off that manipulator. Now that stuff is set up. Next thing I want to do is turn on area lights, area shadows, I'm sorry. Shadows are enabled right now, but we're using those harsh ray trace shadows, the ones that cause these kinds of shadows, these very harsh, hard edge shadows. I'm going to go to area, I'm going to turn on area light, and our shadows become a little bit smoother and a little bit more faint. Now, right now it's not looking too good. That's because we have to make a few changes to this. If we go over here to our spotlight, you'll notice that when I turn area light off, there's a square here that disappeared. Let me turn it back on and watch. A square is going to appear right there. See that white square that appeared? That represents the actual shape and size of our area light. Right now the shape, or geometry, is set to rectangle, which is why we see that little square right there. But we can actually change the shape. So I can go over here to X and change that to 10. I can go to Y and change that to 15, for example. And I essentially change the shape of the area light. And now if I do a render of these objects here on the wall, you'll notice that the shadows actually changed. They're a lot softer now, and they're not as hard as before, which looks much more realistic. This improves the realism and the quality of the lighting in our scene, because we no longer have hard area shadows. We have these very soft area shadows. See how this light interacts here with this area of light and shadow? It looks great and much more realistic. Helps to sell the effect if you're going for a photorealistic render, which is exactly what we're doing here. Now, we could set up this area shape to be the same size as the entire window. Now, there's a good side to that. The good side is the area light's going to look pretty nice. The bad side is it's going to require more of these U and V samples right here where it says 3 and 3 to look better. Now, the more you increase those samples, the longer your rendering time is going to be. That's why I chose to use a much smaller area light shape like this, because it's going to give us realistic results, while at the same time it's going to save us some rendering time. So just one thing that you want to be aware of, And keep in mind, also keep in mind that changing the shape adjusts and changes the way that these area shadows look. So the larger the shape, the softer these shadows are going to look. And right now they're looking pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that like that. My intensity is good. Area light parameters are good. Everything's looking good. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is, since I already spent plenty of time setting that light up, and let me actually close that PPG. What I can do now is simply take this light that I worked so hard on and copy it and place it at the other windows. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll hit Control Alt Delete and D on the keyboard, Control Alt D, and it's going to create a duplicate. It's going to be on top of the light so you won't be able to see it. So just move it over to the side and you'll be able to see it then. Let's place it in the middle of this window. Now I could place 3 area lights, one for this window, one for this window, and one for this window. I'm not going to do that though, because it's going to take longer to render. The more of these lights we have, the longer our rendering times are going to be, and I don't want to do that. And plus, one light is actually going to work pretty good in this case. We're still going to get a good result, so I'm going to stick with one light. What I am going to do, however, is change the size of this area light because it's too small. So I'm going to change the size to compensate for the larger window that it has to take on. What I'm going to do is hit B on the keyboard to open up this manipulator. I'm going to hit Tab, and now you notice that the area light is going to be highlighted in a bold white. We can actually click on these white lines and drag to change the size of the area light interactively. So I'm just going to make it a bit larger, and actually a bit wider is what I want, so it takes up a little bit more space, which is good. Now what I'll do is I'll do a render region of this area, and we can see our light coming into the window. Not looking too bad, not looking too bad. Let's have a look from the inside. Okay, good. So now we're getting some nice lighting coming in through the window. Excellent. Our couch is starting to look a lot better. We have a lot of artifacting though. We're not going to worry about that now because right now we're just setting up our lights. We're not worried about quality. So what we can do now is take this other light and just go ahead and Control Alt D on the keyboard, D for Delta, and we can move it over here, place it at this window, go ahead and rotate it to where it's negative 180 degrees, and just go ahead and eyeball it. Just place it right in front of the window, right about at the middle, and that looks pretty good. And I got a little problem here. My light fall off doesn't reach the entire room, which of course, like I said earlier, is not good. So let's take that and let's drag it until the yellow area just passes the entire room and overshoots it by a little bit, and there we go. So let's do a render region from this side, see what we've got. Okay, so now we got some nice lighting coming into this scene. And I recorded some camera views up here for you. We have 4 up here. So if you click on the first one with the left mouse button, it takes you to a predetermined camera spot where we can do some very nice rendered angles to have a good look at this scene and see how it's coming out. So let's just render from here. Make sure you keep your anti-aliasing pretty low so it renders real fast. Right now we're just trying to get a feel for this. We're just trying to go ahead and do some preview renders to see how this is coming out. We don't need to sit here forever rendering out these nice crisp images that are going to change anyway because we haven't even touched global illumination yet. Okay, so we got the nice lighting coming in. There's the ceiling, the light fixtures, which are off because this is a daytime scene. We got some nice area light soft shadows going here. Let's do maybe one more render from this side. And we can clearly see that our lights have dramatically improved this scene by quite a bit. And this is a huge difference from where we started with the default XSI lighting. But this is still nothing. We're still just scratching the surface of this. We haven't even started adding global illumination yet. Okay, so I'm going to end it here because I think we went long enough with this at least. And in the next video, we're going to go ahead and activate global illumination and start working with it and tweak it out and get it going.